The UN Security Council is holding an emergency session today to discuss North Korea's latest missile test. The country successfully launched its third intercontinental ballistic missile yesterday northeast of Pyongyang. The missile stayed in the air for 53 minutes and traveled about 600 miles before landing in the Sea of Japan. North Korea says it is capable of striking anywhere in the United States.
President Trump weighed in on the test during a meeting yesterday with congressional leaders. Mr. Trump said the U.S. will handle the nuclear threat, but did not mention specifically how.
As you probably have heard, and some of you have reported, a missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only tell you that we will take care of it. We have General Mattis in the room with us, and we've had a long discussion on it. It is a situation that we will handle.
These missile launches today, does it change anything about your basic approach to dealing with it?
Nothing changed. Nothing changed. We have a very serious approach, and nothing changed.
To discuss it all, let's bring in Chief Washington Correspondent for Yahoo News, Olivier Knox. He joins us now from our Washington bureau. So, Olivier, the president says we will handle North Korea and that nothing has changed. We've heard that before following missile launches. It seems as if his patience is being tested. But how can we interpret those comments?
Well, nothing has changed in the sense that the president actually this morning placed a phone call to China's Xi Jinping and urged him to use China's considerable leverage over North Korea to return North Korea to the path of denuclearization. Nothing has changed makes sense. What was worrisome about that missile test is the altitude and the implied range, because it's not just North Korea that says that it could strike anywhere inside the United States. The independent group, the Union of Concerned Scientists, said yesterday that based on their calculations, a missile like that could actually reach Washington, D.C. But the president's been working, the administration's been working on a very aggressive diplomatic push to convince China and other countries to tighten the economic vice on North Korea. And they've done a fairly good job. Let's watch to see what happens out of the UN Security Council. The Security Council has voted twice by 15-0 margins in recent months to impose new sanctions on North Korea. So while we're not really sure what led to this latest test, North Korea does appear to be at least feeling the pressure.
Well, we do know that the president redesignated North Korea a state sponsor of terror really a week ago, so maybe that triggered things. We know, as you mentioned, that he spoke to Chinese President Xi Jinping this morning. The White House said in a statement that President Trump emphasized the need for China to use all available levers to convince North Korea to end its provocations and return to the path of denuclearization. But really, what is left? I mean, China in particular has already placed restrictions on banks, has already scaled back trade with North Korea. Is there anything left to do?
Actually, there's a lot left to do. Despite all the news coverage, there are still a lot of sanctions that could be imposed on North Korea. And actually, you're seeing some effort to do that. What was notable at the UN Security Council votes in the last couple of months is what they were going after. They were trying to starve North Korea of foreign currency. They were going after things like shipping in and out of North Korea. They were going after things like North Korean workers being shipped overseas as de facto slave labor, but that generates money for the regime. China, despite its recent efforts, is still North Korea's largest export market. They chiefly export coal briquettes for fuel. So there's still a lot of room there. As many sanctions as there are still other steps that can be taken. And this is why, actually, if you look away from China for a second, even though it is the most important player, look away from China for a second and look at a country like Singapore, which until relatively recently had a banking relationship with entities in North Korea. So there's still a lot going on. The state sponsorship of terrorism thing, that was a mostly symbolic move. But the administration is hoping to have a kind of name and shame relationship there, to sort of say, how could you possibly do any business with a state sponsor of terrorists? And they're especially hopeful that some countries will stop providing North Korea with what are called dual-use technologies, things that could be used both for civilian and military applications.
Olivier, let's shift focus just a little bit, because up until yesterday afternoon, when the news of this launch was announced, all the focus was on tax reform. The president was on Capitol Hill selling the plan to Senate Republicans. He'll take that pitch on the road. Does it seem like this bill is gaining momentum?
It's a little bit hard to say. I mean, gaining momentum, let's put this in perspective. They're trying to lock down Republican votes. They don't have the Republican votes as of this moment to pass this bill. So even though they've gotten stuff through the Senate Budget Committee on a strictly party line basis, it's a little bit hard to gauge the momentum. They suffered a pretty bad blow yesterday when the Congressional Budget Office came out. The independent, nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office came out and said that this bill would in fact raise taxes on people making less than $30,000 a year, while cutting taxes for corporations and the wealthiest Americans. So it's a little bit hard to gauge that momentum at the moment. We're all counting votes in the Senate, but even after that, we still have to see the Senate and the House reconcile their two different versions of this bill. I'd be very cautious. They've got a very ambitious deadline. They want to do this by Christmas. They have a lot of other things on their plate. They have to keep the government open. There are things that their health programs for children that they're probably going to renew. They might try to tackle some immigration questions. I'd be cautious about assigning too much momentum to this legislation.
So before we let you go, Olivier, the president was tweeting a lot this morning on a variety of topics, including he retweeted a couple of videos from a far-right account full of anti-Muslim content. The videos purport to show Muslims assaulting people. One video shows a man smashing a statue of the Virgin Mary. Now, these videos, there's 3 of them. These videos were so bad that, at least on my feed, I had to change my settings because Twitter had actually blocked it, so I couldn't see it unless I requested that I see it. What do you make of this?
Well, that's an interesting question. This is actually a fairly unsettling moment. This is a Britain first. That's what the guy who assassinated a member of parliament last year shouted before he killed her. This is a far-right account. One of the other things in that timeline describes the media as the Jews' weapon against Islam. You know, the president has harnessed anti-Muslim sentiment in this country. It was the Muslim ban. He talked about putting a total freeze on Muslim immigration until we can figure out what's going on, famously. So in some ways, this is in character. The other thing to know about these videos is that they're unverified. There are doubts about what they actually show. There are media, for example, that are calling into question whether things happened in the countries where they're alleged to have happened. But, you know, this is the president unleashed on Twitter, as always.
You know, what I found interesting about these videos is, yeah, we're talking about it now, but it's almost like isn't big news. And the videos are really bad. And the account that it comes from is, like I said, is an account that Twitter blocked for me. Are we just becoming sort of used to this sort of thing from this president?
No, I don't think so. If we were just used to it, if we were sort of immune to the shock value here, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. It's just hard to keep it in context because there's so much going on. You know, that worrisome North Korea launch, the fate of the tax bill, which, by the way, it's supposedly tax week, right? The president is supposed to be putting his political shoulder to the wheel to try to get this legislation through. And instead, he's retweeting a far-right account that's posted a lot of ugly stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for reminding us there's actual news that's going on. Olivier Knox of Yahoo News, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.